Have you ever witnessed someone being treated with disdain simply because of their appearance, as if they had no importance whatsoever in that place? Now imagine this happening in a formal setting, surrounded by authority figures, rehearsed speeches, and watchful eyes, where every gesture carries power and every word can define destinies. What you are about to discover may surprise you, greatly so. The scene is a grand gathering at the Department of Education, one of those events that brings together influential business people, public officials, government representatives, and people who believe they are shaping the country's future. The atmosphere is sophisticated, the corridors silent, the greetings calculated. Everything seems to follow a predictable script until the arrival of a man who doesn't go unnoticed, a billionaire, known, respected, feared, someone accustomed to entering any place and being recognized, listened to, and obeyed without question from the first step inside the building. He carries with him an almost palpable air of superiority. His gaze sweeps over people as if he were assessing who deserves attention and who can be ignored. For him, this is not just an institutional event, it is a territory where he believes he is in charge. His posture betrays this, his erect body, his confident tone, the absolute certainty that his presence there is more important than anyone else's. Have you ever seen this type of person, the kind who walks into a room, believing everyone else is just a background character in their own story? Stick with me until the end, because it's precisely in this climate of unbalanced power that something begins to unfold. As the billionaire walks through the Department of Education, greeting only those he considers of his caliber, one figure catches his attention, not out of admiration, but the opposite. A black woman, discreet, well-dressed with a firm posture, waiting for the meeting to begin like anyone else there. In his eyes, she doesn't seem to fit the mold of authority he imagines dominates that space, and this silent, swift, and cruel judgment is the first sign that something unjust is about to happen. The way he observes his surroundings makes it clear that for him, power has a face, a color, a status, and anything that deviates from that is automatically devalued. Without exchanging words, he already decides who deserves respect and who can be treated with indifference. That's how prejudice disguises itself as self-confidence, and arrogance hides behind positions and figures. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Perhaps you've been underestimated, ignored, or belittled in an environment where everyone seemed to measure worth solely by appearance or surname. Stories like this awaken something deep because they touch on real wounds. And that's precisely why this situation begins to generate a silent unease in the air. The billionaire doesn't realize it, but each step he takes with disdain brings him closer to a twist he never imagined he would experience. While he feels superior to everyone, fate begins to align invisible pieces. The meeting hasn't even started yet, but the atmosphere has already changed. There are attentive glances, there is contained tension, there is a clear feeling that this story will not follow the path he expects. What lies behind that silent presence? Who is, in fact, that woman he insists on ignoring? What happens when someone who believes they control everything discovers too late that they judged the wrong person? Stay with me, because from here on out, every gesture will matter, and what's about to be revealed could turn everything upside down. And perhaps that's exactly why this story starts to tug at the heartstrings of those who watch it. Because on some level, it's not just about an arrogant billionaire or an unjustly underestimated woman. It speaks to situations that many people have already lived through, felt firsthand, or witnessed in silence. Moments when someone enters a space thinking they're in charge, while other people have to prove themselves twice as much to be seen as equals. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Sometimes writing about a similar experience or even a hidden feeling helps more people than you imagine to not feel alone. While this tension grows within the Department of Education, it's worth remembering that stories like this only gain strength when they are shared. When you like this video, you're not just pressing a button. You're saying that this type of narrative matters, that reflections on prejudice, power, and justice need to reach more people. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and carry these stories forward, reaching those who may need to hear exactly this today. And if you feel that this content resonates with you, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue this exchange. It's like saying, I want to be here, I want to hear more stories that make you think, that disturb you, that move you. Each subscription strengthens this community that is being built little by little with real people, real stories, and reflections that don't end when the video finishes. Because what's happening there is far from being resolved. The silence in that room holds more than just embarrassment. It hides a truth about to surface, a revelation that no one expects, least of all that man who entered believing he was above everyone else. From here on, every look, every word, and every decision will completely change the course of this story. And that's exactly where everything begins to transform. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is precisely in the first contact that many hidden truths begin to reveal themselves. The billionaire walks down the hallway with determined steps, speaking loudly on his cell phone, as if the entire environment had to adapt to his rhythm. When the call ends, he crosses paths with the black woman almost by chance. There is no formal introduction, no exchange of names, just a quick glance, full of judgment, followed by an automatic reaction. He assumes she is irrelevant. She tries to position herself, makes a simple observation, something related to the organization of the meeting, but is interrupted before she can even finish the sentence. He raises his hand in a dry, impatient gesture as if to say that it doesn't matter. The tone isn't overtly aggressive, but it carries a cold irony, the kind that hurts precisely because it seems polite. He corrects her words unnecessarily, gives orders as if she were part of the support team, someone who is there only to serve. This type of situation happens in seconds, but the impact is profound, because it's not just about what is said, it's about how it's said. It's about the look that pierces through, the half smile, the posture of someone who feels authorized to belittle the other. And yet, she doesn't react with visible anger. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't over-explain. She maintains an upright posture, takes a deep breath, and responds with clarity, firmness, and elegance. Each of her words is chosen carefully, not out of fear, but out of awareness. She knows who she is. She knows the path she has traveled, the decisions she had to make, the behind-the-scenes details of her own journey to get there. While he talks over her, she listens. While he tries to dominate the conversation, she maintains her silence with dignity. This contrast begins to bother those observing from afar because it reveals something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding. It reveals a mentality that still insists on measuring worth by appearance. The billionaire continues, now a little more incisive. He makes an out-of-place joke, something that sounds like a casual comment, but carries enormous weight. He questions whether she really understands the subject, as if it were unlikely that this woman could have authority in that space. It is at this moment that the atmosphere changes, not because of him, but because of her. Because even being underestimated, she doesn't shrink back. She holds his gaze, answers confidently, and remains firm, like someone who knows her own truth and doesn't need to prove it at that moment. This scene evokes outrage because it is familiar. How many times are competent people interrupted, discredited, or treated with disdain before they even have a chance to speak? How many times does prejudice hide behind formalities and forced smiles? The impact of this goes beyond that room. It touches on personal stories, old wounds, memories of times when someone had to swallow injustice to move forward. The most curious thing is that the billionaire doesn't realize what he's doing. For him, it's natural. He believes he's simply being direct, objective, and efficient. But in reality, he's revealing a mindset trapped in stereotypes, incapable of seeing the transformation that happens when people occupy spaces that were previously denied to them. He talks, interrupts, and is ironic, while she builds something much more powerful: presence. And this presence begins to generate a silent effect. Some glances avert, others fix on her with renewed attention. Some perceive that there is a contained force there, an authority that doesn't need to announce itself. It's as if, in that first contact, two forms of power clash, one based on money and arrogance, the other built along a journey made of difficult choices, resilience, and truth. Nothing is explicitly said, but much is left unsaid. The billionaire moves on, believing he has won that brief interaction. She remains there, serene, as if she knows that certain revelations don't need to be rushed. Something is stirring behind the scenes of that situation, something that hasn't yet surfaced, but which begins to take shape from this encounter marked by contempt and dignity. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's at this point that the situation ceases to be merely an isolated act of contempt and becomes something public, visible, impossible to ignore. The meeting finally begins. People take their seats, side conversations diminish, and the atmosphere assumes that formal silence that precedes important decisions. That's when the billionaire decides to speak. And in doing so, he doesn't just occupy the space, he dominates it. His voice echoes with excessive confidence. He comments on investments, on efficiency, on how certain areas of education need truly prepared people. Up to this point, everything seems as expected, but then he directs his gaze towards her. Not directly, but as if casting a doubt in the air. He questions procedures she had mentioned before, calls into question the validity of the information, and, without mentioning names, makes it clear that he is referring to that black woman sitting a few meters away from him. The silence that falls is uncomfortable. It's a heavy, awkward silence. Some people shift in their seats. Others pretend to write something down, avoiding eye contact. He continues, now with more evident irony, insinuating that perhaps some people are confusing presence with authority. It's a short sentence, but loaded with impact. The kind of sentence that humiliates without needing to shout. She feels the weight of the moment but doesn't rush. She doesn't react impulsively. She waits for the right space, like someone who understands that certain decisions need to be made clearly. When she finally speaks, her voice doesn't tremble. She answers objectively, reaffirms facts, calmly corrects inaccuracies, and moves on, without attacking, without justifying herself beyond what is necessary. Even so, he interrupts. Once, then again, as if he wanted to prove in front of everyone that she is not in control of the situation. That's when the humiliation becomes public. Not because he raises his voice, but because he insists on delegitimizing her. He questions whether she's really part of the event's coordination, whether she has the authority to speak at that level, whether she's getting ahead of herself. Each question is an attempt to push her out of that symbolic space, as if to say between the lines that that place wasn't made for her. The impact of this spreads through the room. Some feel indignation, some recognize the pattern, and some begin to realize that there is something that is not being said, because the way she maintains her posture, the confidence with which she responds, the emotional control in the face of provocation, all of this points to a hidden truth. It's not someone improvising. It's not someone out of place. It's someone who knows that environment intimately. The billionaire, however, remains blinded by his own mindset. He believes he's winning the argument, when in reality he's revealing far more about himself than about her. Each attempt at public exposure increases the tension. Each pointed comment makes the contrast between arrogance and consistency, between noise and substance, even more evident. The atmosphere grows heavy. Time seems to slow down. There's a pause that's far too long after one of the interruptions. She looks around for a second, as if measuring the impact of what's happening. There's no rush, there's strategy, there's a clear awareness that this moment is part of something bigger, of a journey that didn't begin there and that won't be defined by that attack. Behind the scenes of that meeting, something begins to reorganize. People who were previously observing from afar are now paying attention. Expressions change. The attempt at public humiliation, instead of diminishing her, begins to expose the fragility of the attacker. Because when someone needs to disqualify another in front of everyone, it's a sign that they fear what they don't know. Still, nothing has been revealed. The entire room feels that there is a missing piece in this puzzle, information that, when it comes to light, will completely change the interpretation of that scene. The tension doesn't dissipate. On the contrary, it intensifies, as if being prepared for something yet to come. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is precisely here that the story shifts, and everything that seemed solid begins to crumble before a single revelation. After yet another interruption, another comment laden with irony, something different happens in the room. It's not a sudden gesture, nor a loud remark. It's a subtle change, almost imperceptible, but enough to alter the course of everything. One of the meeting organizers asks for the floor. His tone is formal and respectful, as protocol dictates. He begins by thanking everyone for their presence, speaks briefly about the importance of the meeting, and then naturally mentions her name. There is no forced suspense, no theatrical announcement, just the truth being told in the simplest way possible. He introduces her as if presenting an undeniable fact. The black woman, until then questioned, interrupted, and delegitimized, is the State Secretary of Education. For a second, no one reacts. The silence that settles now is unlike any before. It's not just embarrassment, it's shock. It's belated understanding. It's the weight of reality crashing down on everyone in that room, especially on someone who, just moments before, believed they were in complete control of the situation. The billionaire freezes. His body, previously relaxed and confident, stiffens. His gaze, which had been sweeping with superiority, loses focus. He blinks a few times, as if trying to mentally reorganize everything he has just heard. The hidden truth reveals itself without. Asking permission, dismantling in seconds the entire narrative he had constructed in his own mind. The entire room seems to breathe at once. Some gazes immediately turn to him. Others remain fixed on him, now with a mixture of respect, admiration, and understanding. The transformation of the atmosphere is almost palpable. Where there was once doubt, now there is clarity. Where there was contempt, recognition arises. Where there was an attempt at humiliation, a silent and powerful poetic justice takes hold. She doesn't change her posture. She doesn't smile arrogantly. She doesn't react with revenge. She simply confirms with a slight nod, as if to say she never needed to announce herself. The authority was always there. What was missing was the right perspective to see it. This is one of the most uncomfortable revelations for those who judge by appearances, realizing they've been wrong all along. The billionaire tries to compose himself. He straightens up in his chair, clears his throat, rehearses a few words that don't come out with the same firmness as before. His dominant mentality collapses in the face of reality. He realizes too late that he exposed not her fragility, but his own. Each previous interruption now echoes with a different meaning. Each pointed comment returns as a bitter reflection of the decisions he made based on prejudice. The power shift is complete. Not because someone shouted or confronted him directly, but because the truth did it on its own. Its presence, previously ignored, now undeniably occupies the center of the room. People begin to address it with care, with attention, with the respect that was always due. And he feels it. He feels it in the silence that surrounds him, in the glances that no longer confirm him, in the awkward pauses that arise whenever he tries to regain control of the conversation. This moment carries an impact that goes beyond that meeting. It reveals something profound about how decisions are made, about how invisible journeys are disregarded, about how behind-the-scenes effort and competence are erased when someone allows themselves to be guided by stereotypes. Reverse humiliation doesn't come as revenge, but as a natural consequence of a misguided stance. She continues speaking, now without interruption. She lays out strategic points, presents data, and conducts the conversation with confidence. Each sentence reinforces that this place has always been hers, regardless of who believed otherwise. The transformation is not within her, but in those who finally begin to see it. Even with all this exposed, the feeling is that there are still layers to be understood, because that revelation doesn't end the story. It only opens space for something even deeper, something that begins to move behind the scenes from this clash of realities, where past choices begin to take their toll and new decisions become inevitable. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after the revelation, what remains is not the noise of humiliation, but the silence that teaches. That same billionaire who minutes before spoke with excessive confidence now seems to be searching for words that won't come. He adjusts his jacket, looks around as if trying to situate himself in unfamiliar territory. The power he believed he possessed slips through his fingers without anyone needing to forcibly take it away. It's the natural consequence of a mentality built on shallow judgments. Silence spreads through the room in a different way. It's no longer collective embarrassment, it's reflection. It's the kind of pause that forces people to review internal decisions, old beliefs, poorly constructed certainties. The impact of that moment is not only in the immediate shock, but in what it provokes internally. The hidden truth has come to light, and with it, a series of silent revelations about how prejudice operates behind the scenes of power. The secretary remains serene. There is no triumph on her face, nor satisfaction in seeing the other disconcerted. There is only the tranquility of someone who knows that the journey itself does not need external validation to have value. She speaks when necessary, listens when appropriate, and handles the situation with the same firmness she has always had. Her authority was not born in that instant. It only became visible to those who previously refused to see it. The contrast is inevitable. Now, one side, someone accustomed to being obeyed, now limited by their own arrogance. On the other, someone who was underestimated, but whose trajectory is made of difficult choices, resilience, and constant transformation. The lesson isn't spoken aloud, but it echoes loudly enough to fill the entire room. Appearance doesn't define intelligence, power, or position. It never has. The billionaire realizes that any attempt to regain control would only deepen the discomfort. Every word now weighs heavily. Every gesture is observed. He understands, perhaps for the first time, that decisions made based on stereotypes exact a high price, not only in reputation, but in credibility. The humiliation he tried to inflict turns against him silently, without applause, without scandal, but with a clarity impossible to ignore. This type of scene provokes an internal transformation in the viewer, because it's not just a momentary role reversal, but a mirror. How many times does society repeat this? Same script in other contexts. How many trajectories are made invisible because they don't correspond to the expected image of power? How many truths remain hidden until someone is forced to confront them? The silence that fills the room serves as a necessary pause to rethink mindsets. It exposes how arrogance impoverishes decisions and how prejudice limits the ability to see the big picture. The secretary, with her firm and calm demeanor, represents something greater than a position. She symbolizes the impact of a journey built with consistency, even when no one was watching. And perhaps that's what makes this moment so powerful. There's no moralizing discourse, no explicit lesson being delivered. There's only reality imposing itself. The understanding that underestimating someone says much more about the one judging than about the one being judged. The feeling that certain revelations arrive at the exact time to dismantle fragile structures sustained only by status and ego. As the meeting continues, now under a different energy, it becomes clear that nothing there will ever be the same again. Some people leave transformed, others uneasy, others in reflective silence. Because stories like these don't end when the scene is over. They continue to reverberate, influencing future decisions, adjusting perspectives, stirring deep-seated beliefs. And it is precisely at this point that the story ceases to be just about that specific encounter and begins to engage with something larger, something that touches the viewer in a personal way, because everyone at some point has been on one side or the other of this dynamic. Everyone carries choices, behind-the-scenes stories, and revelations that have not yet come to light. And when reality begins to reorganize itself after a shock like this, there is a feeling that there is still much to be observed, understood, and confronted from here on out. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has resonated with you in some way. Perhaps not because of the details, but because of what it reveals about mindset, choices, and how we look at, or fail to look at, the people around us. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue this journey with me, following stories that are not just for entertainment, but to provoke thought and transformation. If you'd like, you can also leave a comment saying you made it to the end. You could write something like, "This message was for me. I read," and that helps keep this space alive, like a real conversation between people who are willing to look a little deeper. And if at any point you felt a connection to this story, a like here is just a silent way of saying so, of showing that the content found you where it needed to. Oh, and there's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've talked about today. If it makes sense, click on it and continue watching.